Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and in this video we're breaking down House of the Dragon. Season 2 episode 5 is now here, and throughout this video we're going to be breaking it all down. This video is going to be filled with what happens in the episode along with what also happens in the book. So come with me as we talk about the aftermath of Rooks Rest and what the characters are going through. As always, we'll save future spoilers until the end of the video, and I'll give you a heads up before we get to that point. Please hit the thumbs up if you enjoy it, and make sure you subscribe for our breakdowns every week. With that out of the way, huge thank you for clicking this. Now let's get into House of the Dragon.
Was it worth the price?
Now, we begin at Driftmark and can hear echoes of Rhaenys' theme in the score. Cutting to Corlys inside of the castle, the characters shown from the back. Seeing characters like this is something that we get a lot of in this episode, with it also being shown in Aemond and Alicent. The first of these comes when he stands staring at the throne at the end, with it mirroring the shot of Corlys looking at his. With Alicent, we see she approaches Aegon being worked on by the Maesters, and all these shots echo each other. They clearly highlight the gains and losses that have come from the Battle of Rooks Rest, with both Aegon and Rhaenys being two characters that went toe to toe. Both came out the other side a little worse for wear, and it was a big defeat on both sides. I said big defeat, Laris, but not defeat. Put your cock away. Although Aegon's still alive, he's never gonna fight again, and his dragon Sunfire's out the fight too. The only one who's really gained anything is Aemond, with him truly playing the Game of Thrones.
I understood that reference.
Either way, the guy's clearly not having a good time, and echoing his despair, we also see Rhaenyra shares the same sentiment. The quest for the throne is causing Westeros to rot, which we saw metaphorically with Viserys in Season 1. Cut by the Iron Throne, he developed a disease that caused his body to rot away and die. It's been all about getting that spot, which has now caused this gigantic war. Cutting to the market at King's Landing, we now see how this is extended to the fruit there, with it also rotting away. Meleys's rotting head is carried through the streets, and we need a seed of hope. That of course comes at the end with the dragon seeds, with them being something that can provide a new avenue. We've met some of these throughout the season before, and in our spoiler section I'll go into more detail. Now, Meleys's head getting paraded through the streets of King's Landing is also something we hear about in the work. This also chronicles the aftermath of Rooks Rest and how many lost their lives. 800 knights and squires and common men lost their lives that day as well. Another 100 perished not long after, when Prince Aemond and Sir Criston Cole took Rooks Rest and put its garrison to death. Lord Staunton's head was carried back to King's Landing and mounted above the old gate, but it was the head of the dragon Meleys, drawn through the city on a cart, that awed the crowds of small folk into silence. Septon Eustace tells us that thousands left King's Landing afterwards, until the Dowager Queen Alicent ordered the city gates closed and barred. Now, this parading of a head is done for a number of reasons, and it's once more used as propaganda. Similar to how Jaehaerys was marched through the streets, we also have Meleys on the back of a cart. It's supposed to show strength in the Greens, and they'll parade their wins and losses for their own political gains. Jaehaerys was done to get sympathy, whereas Meleys was done to show power. In truth though, Aegon's being moved through silently and hidden away from public view. The Greens want to make it seem like they're in power, and I love how these two scenes mirror each other. This also mirrors Jaehaerys as well, because both lost their head.
I thought the dragons was gods.
Now, beyond that, the dragons were supposed to be respected, with them being beautiful beasts thought to be gods. This is something Jace touches upon later on, with it being thought that only the Targaryens can ride a dragon. This is because they carry something known as the blood of the dragon. Thus, bastards, shout out to Robert Baratheon, they're people who are also thought can ride the beasts, while keeping the illusion that only certain people can do it. It's purposely been brought in to keep the peasants in their place and give the belief that the dragon riders are gods. Hugh Hammer being here is also very important, and we'll talk about him more later in the spoiler section. Now, parading dragons through the streets like this is sort of showing their hand, and we see from the reactions that people start to question their invincibility. Maegor didn't respect them, and he was ousted, and it shows the Greens don't respect history. Beyond this though, it also highlights how the realm's fallen into disarray. The White Cloaks, they're having a laugh, mate, breaking their oaths and breaking hymens, and they don't carry honour. Everyone, take that comment back, yeah? That was a bit too far even for my sense of humour, so apologies for that. Yeah, I've let everyone down, and I'm kind of getting sucked into the kingdom myself, and just being a right dickhead that nobody likes. Everyone's just kind of slacking, and this further highlights how far the realm has fallen, and this channel. Now, my Zoriel later brings up how this is perceived as an ill omen, and if the dragons and Targaryens can fall, then it heightens their feelings of instability. You also see how the soldiers aren't regarded as heroes, with it being akin to things like Vietnam. Though people fought for their country, it was seen as a controversial war, and thus the return home wasn't really a celebration. This is something Kristen remarks at, and it's clearly drawing real-world parallels. Also, you might notice that they're saying Aegon slay the beast when the guy's plan was a little half-baked. A little half-baked, eh? Like him, hey. Now you can kind of see how the lie doesn't necessarily set that well with Kristen, but they're doing it to hide away the truth. We also march past the rotting rat catchers who've got worse and worse every time we've seen them. I kind of think this highlights the mood of the people and how they feel about what the war has brung. Though Aegon managed to get revenge on Cheese, he did this by harming a multitude of innocents. It's sort of like how the wars cost people so much, and very symbolic on a number of different levels. See mate, you thought I was reaching with that rot comment, but Maylee's rotting away with the flies around her. It's very, very clever. Now from here we cut to a symbolic shot of Alicent and Aemond looking down on the proceedings. Larys warned Aegon the pair would take rule if he went to war, and this has been the outcome of it. Alicent clearly wants to be included, but as we see later on that doesn't happen. However, these two figures standing there and being the ones who want power, looking over the keep and the dead dragons, it carries a lot of symbolism. Now as for Aegon, I feel like we have to talk about the way he was found in order to discuss the full extent of what happened to him. This comes in the aftermath of the battle in which Aegon and Rhaenys were found on the ground. Those closest to the dragons did not live to tell the tale. Those farther off could not see for the flame and smoke. It was hours before the fires gutted out, but from those ashes only Vhagar rose unharmed. Meleys was dead, broken by the fall and ripped to pieces upon the ground. And Sunfire, that splendid golden beast, had one wing half torn from his body, whilst his royal rider had suffered broken ribs, a broken hip, and burns that covered half his body. His left arm was the worst. The dragon flame had burned so hot that the king's armor had melted into his flesh. Which, yeah, is exactly what we see when they're peeling it off him. As for Aegon, upon his return to King's Landing, the work says, King Aegon II did not die, though his burns brought him such pain that some say he prayed for death. Carried back to King's Landing in a closed litter to hide the extent of his injuries, his grace did not rise from his bed for the rest of the air. Septons prayed for him. Maesters attended him with potions and milk of the poppy, but Aegon slept 9 hours out of every 10, waking only long enough to take some meagre nourishment before he slept again. None was allowed to disturb his rest, save his mother the Queen Dowager and his hand Sir Criston Cole. His wife never so much as made the attempt. So lost was Helaena in her own grief and madness. Now, they do alter this for the show, as we have Helaena looking at the litter without being too broken up about it. In fact, when we look at the work, she's going in a drastically different direction. There, she was so grief-stricken by the death of Jaehaerys that she wouldn't bathe, eat, or hit the thumbs up. The show version is a complete opposite, with her not being like that. Now, I do wonder if it's the major change in Blood and Cheese that's taken the character in a brand new direction. In the work, she chose her son Maelor to die, and Blood and Cheese beheaded Jaehaerys to taunt her. Thus, she went insane, thinking that he might be aware that he'd been chosen to die. So they changed things up majorly for Aegon, and we see he's hidden away and attended by several maesters. He didn't take the Battle of Rooks Rest seriously and was drinking and laughing before he and Sunfire headed out. On the other side of this, Rhaenys and Meleys clearly knew there was a chance they might not come back, and yeah, for Aegon it was basically around and find out. Now we also see Aegon the Conqueror's sword Blackfire lifted out the litter, with this highlighting what he was trying to be. In the end though, he turned out to be more like his dad, bed-bound and blood oozing out the sores on his skin. We get a brilliant shot at the end with him in his bed, wrapped in bandages, that's almost shot exactly the same as how Viserys was portrayed. The wounds have swapped sides with Aegon though, and it's a perfect mirror from that scene in Season 1. Even Alicent's there at his bedside, but he meant Aegon the Conqueror love, not this one. I love the way they play Operation with him, and Aemond smugly looks over. You've got some nerve, mate. Got some nerve showing your face round here. Aemond taking over the rule of the realm in his brother's stead is something he brings up. Well, he suggests, and later on at the council, we see this come to pass. The work says, "You must rule the realm now, until your brother is strong enough to take the crown again," the king's hand told Prince Aemond. Nor did Sir Criston need to say it twice, writes Eustace. And so one-eyed Aemond the Kinslayer took up the iron and ruby crown of Aegon the Conqueror. "It looks better on me than it ever did on him," the prince proclaimed. Yet Aemond did not assume the style of king, but named himself only Protector of the Realm and Prince Regent. Sir Criston Cole remained Hand of the King. Now, Aemond being after the throne is something we've seen throughout the series, and this goes all the way back to Driftmark. There he told Aegon he'd wed his sister Helena if it was his duty. At the coronation, we saw him staring at his brother with envy as he was crowned, and we had everything going down at Rooks Rest last week. He burned his brother and even went to slay him before his hand was stayed by Criston Cole. When he picked up the cat's paw dagger, we also saw him pointing it at him. I don't think Aemond has any love for his brother, and the Greens are sort of in their own little civil war. The infighting is something that's mirrored in the Blacks, as we have Daemon there who might want to take power from Rhaenyra. Here though, it's on the surface with Aegon ousting Otto and Alicent from the council. Aemond's now put his brother in harm's way, and he has a clear route to the throne. I love how it all plays upon the idea of a civil war, as we have brother versus brother. This is something that Eric and Eric showcased as well, and it all ties into the main themes of the show. It also makes him the perfect opposite to Daemon, as Daemon's clearly wanting control as well. Both believe they're better leaders, but they were both passed over for their brothers. Both are ruthless and willing to make the hard choice, but because of this, they're also pretty cruel. Aegon, mate, he was wanting to give people payment before they even put the invoice in, and Viserys just wanted to play with his train set. Daemon though, he's vicious, Aemond is as well, and you take the D from Daemon and put it on the end of Aemon, and yeah, done that before, but it is worth pointing out. This is why Daemon's dream last week showed him wearing an eye patch, and I love how these pieces all fit together perfectly. I also wonder if this ability to lead goes beyond blood and also into knowledge. Aemon now has the cat's paw dagger, and it's possible that he could be aware of what's on it. Last week he picked it up as it lay amongst the burning forest and bodies of Aegon and Sunfire, so there's even the potential that he saw the Song of Ice and Fire, and this may allow him to use it as a power play. It's only passed from king to heir, and thus knowing it while others don't could make him seem more legitimate. Either way, I'd love to hear your thoughts, as the dagger is such a wild card in the show. Wasn't used in any way like this in the book, and they could use it to create some really interesting dynamics, especially with Daemon. Ewan Mitchell brought up how he played into this rivalry in the show by keeping the coin he found when Blood and Cheese had been in his room.
That coin means that Daemon was this close to getting Aemond, and there's a romantic element for him. He quite likes the fact that Daemon wants to kill him.
Now this video, we've been talking a lot about civil wars, but what if one was to happen in modern day America? Well, that takes us to one of the best movies of the year, Civil War. From writer and director Alex Garland comes this incredible adrenaline-fueled thrill ride through a near-future fractured America. Following a team of military-embedded journalists, we watch as they race against time to reach Washington, D.C. before rebel factions descend upon the White House. Starring Kirsten Dunst and Wagner Moura, it's an incredible movie and one of my favourite A24 and Lionsgate films. Civil War is now available on 4K Ultra HD and Blu-ray, and you should definitely go and pick it up by clicking my link in the description. Included on the Blu-ray is also a 6-part documentary titled Torn Asunder, waging Alex Garland's Civil War. It offers an incredibly detailed look into the making of this gripping tale. The 4K Ultra HD and Blu-ray from A24 and Lionsgate is already out if you're in America, and it drops in the UK today. Make sure you go to my link in the description so you can own this fantastic film, and the highest of recommends for this movie. Go check it out. Anyway, from here we cut to Criston Cole cleaning his sword, and it's like when you work with someone who's an absolute moron and constantly knacks up every single bit of work, and then you get made redundant. Guy's just chilling and sort of polishing his sword and just kind of hoping he doesn't get asked too much. Now, they do bring up Sunfire as well, with them basically saying what it says in the book. Also, got a nice picture of Rhaenys there, so burned you can't even recognize her body. Yay! The king's dragon Sunfire, too huge and heavy to be moved, and unable to fly with his injured wing, remained in the fields beyond Rooks Rest, crawling through the ashes like some great golden worm. In the early days, he fed himself upon the burned carcasses of the slain. When those were gone, the men Sir Criston left behind to guard him brought him calves and sheep. So Sunfire's just walking it off, well, he has to walk it off because can't fly anymore, but it is pretty messed up, and I think it highlights how much the realm was in disarray. The green flag has Sunfire as its symbol with a golden beast front and center. It's supposed to show strength just like Aegon, but the reality's a far cry from how it is. Now Alicent asks what Aemond's hand in this was, with Criston keeping stum. Obviously he knows it's not good to fracture the kingdom even further, and snitches get stitches and end up in ditches. Now from here we cut across to Rhaenyra at the painted table with the council mewing over their losses. They're in shambles, Green Council's in shambles, and they've lost both Rooks Rest and Duskendale, the latter of which is what we saw last week with the Harbour Town's capture leading to Lord Darkland's beheading. They also say Daemon's left them high and dry after a marital spat. It goes way beyond that, but there's clear sexism in gaming. I question whether these men question swearing their loyalty to a woman, and I wonder if the houses are gonna switch sides throughout. The fact is, though, that none of them have really experienced a war like this because the realm's been at peace since the ascension of Jaehaerys. Rhaenyra wants to right to Maidenpool and Crackclaw Point, and these sorts of areas line the Riverlands. A Darkling, he wants revenge for his father's death at Duskendale, and they believe Vhagar's gonna be recovering from the battle. Rhaenyra puts herself forward as the person who should be flying in, but they rightly tell her not to risk it. We've seen firsthand with Aegon why leaders shouldn't be put in the line of fire, as the entire war could be lost in an instant. Over with Jace doing his best blue Valyrian steel, we hear he's flying out to Harrenhal to make Daemon affirm his standing to Rhaenyra. Guy's just off being rogue, and there's lots of suspicions he won't bend the knee to his wife / niece. Jace is also clearly frustrated he's being forced to stay back, but he needs to look at the bigger picture. He's now carrying the Song of Ice and Fire and is Rhaenyra's next in line. Bringing up the phrase, you might remember Walder Frey from the main series. He ended up on Arya's list with him being killed in the final season. Now, Jace's mission has been slightly reordered, as it did happen earlier in the work while he was rallying arms. Initially, he travelled out of these locations, the Vale and then Winterfell, but I do think it was probably better to spread it out. Then on Jaehaerys' sword, north across the Fingers and the waters of the Bight. He lighted briefly at Sisterton, where Lord Borrell and Lord Sunderland did obedience to him and pledged him the support of the Three Sisters, then flew on to White Harbour, where Lord Desmond Manderley met with him in his Merman's court. Now, they're not specifically outlined here, but yeah, we do know what having these allies ends up leading to, with it all worrying the Greens. Meanwhile, the seeds Jaehaerys Velaryon had planted on his flight north had begun to bear fruit, and men were gathering at White Harbour, Winterfell, Barrowtown, Sisterton, Gulltown, and the Gates of the Moon. Should they join their strength at that of the Riverlords assembling at Harrenhal with Prince Daemon, even the strong walls of King's Landing might not be able to withstand them, so Criston warned the new Prince Regent. Now, he sees gaining favour with the Freys as something that will lead to not only one house joining them, but it'll also allow the Starks to get to march forth quicker. Them not getting there in time was a fear in the work, with it saying, the North was too remote to be much import in the fight, the council judged. By the time the Starks gathered their banners and marched south, the war might well be over. Now, he's basically going behind his mother's back to do it, and he confides in Baela. We haven't really seen much of their relationship in the show, though the pair are betrothed. This bit sort of plays off a bit in the work, in which it talks about her on Dragonstone. Lady Rhaenyra's twin Baela remained on Dragonstone. Long betrothed to Prince Jaehaerys, she refused to leave him, insisting that she would fight beside him on her own dragon. The moon dancer was too small to bear her weight. Now, they have changed things for the show, as she has rode on the back of Moondancer, but in the book it's described as being no bigger than a warhorse. So just a quick little injection there. Now let's get back to the book. Though Baela also announced her intent to marry Jace at once, no wedding was ever held. Munkin says the prince did not wish to wed until the war was over, while Mushroom claims Jaehaerys was already married to Sarah Snow, the mysterious bastard girl from Winterfell. Now, the book had it saying that he might have married Cregan's bastard sister Sarah, but this has all been omitted from the show. It was all just a rumour anyway, and yeah, I was kind of gutted that they didn't tie it in with Jon Snow. But on we go, across to Daemon, who says something very important that kind of plays his hand.
Bend the knee to me.
Over the last couple of weeks, we've seen constant back and forth over whether he wants to seek the throne for himself. This is something that's haunted his dreams at Harrenhal, and several characters have talked about his desire to lead. So him saying this and not bend the knee to the Queen or Rhaenyra highlights what his true desires are. The work sort of discusses this along with the bending of the knee by the Brackens. They wear the red horse as their sigil, which should help you identify which characters are which. Either way, this is all building out the aftermath of the opening of episode 3, in which we saw the Battle of the Burning Mill. Many other grievous losses were suffered by both sides in what became known as the Battle of the Burning Mill, and when the Brackens finally broke and fled back into their lands under the command of Sir Amos's bastard half-brother, Sir Raylan Rivers, it was only to find that Stonehenge had been taken in their absence. Led by Prince Daemon on Caraxes, a strong host made up of Darries, Roots, Pipers and Freys had captured the castle by storm in the absence of so much of House Bracken's strength. Lord Humphrey Bracken and his remaining children had been made captive, along with his third wife and base-born paramour. Rather than see them come to harm, Sir Raylan yielded. With House Bracken thus broken and defeated, the last of King Aegon's supporters in the Riverlands lost their heart and lay down their own swords as well. Now, Harrenhal was also a powerful place to spring forth from, and it gave Daemon a plethora of houses close by to take under his wing. The sudden, bloodless fall of Black Harren's seat was counted as a great victory for Queen Rhaenyra and her blacks. It served as a sharp reminder of the martial powers of Prince Daemon and the power of Caraxes the Bloodworm, and gave the Queen a stronghold in the heart of Westeros, to which her supporters could rally, and Rhaenyra had many such in the lands watered by the Trident. When Prince Daemon sent forth his call to arms, they rose up all along the rivers, knights and men-at-arms, and humble peasants who yet remembered the realm's delight, so beloved of her father, and the way she smiled and charmed them as she made her progress through the riverlands in her youth. Hundreds and then thousands buckled on their sword belt and donned their mail, or grabbed a pitchfork or a hoe, and a crude wooden shield, and began to make their way to Harrenhal to fight for Viserys' little girl. Now they played things a little differently, with them refusing to yield and bend the knee easily.
I offer you a choice. Bend the knee and join me.
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
As we've talked about in other breakdowns, the Brackens and Blackwoods have been enemies for centuries. They're like cats and dogs, bloods and crips, screen crushers as us, and heavy spoilerers, and are enemies until the end of time. Still though, Daemon wants the kind of people who would rather burn than turn on their principles, and thus he tasks Willem with trying to sort it out. And at this point we cut across to the Vale, which is a big location from the main series. They sort of rework things, as we saw it while Jace was on his missions in the book, but they've combined the two scenes here. As we cut to the location, we also hear,
"Many and more armies have broken themselves against my bloody gate. The Eyrie itself is impregnable."
Now this pulls from Jace's first encounter with Lady Jane, with the work saying, "Thrice have my own kin sought to replace me," Lady Jane told Prince Jacaerys. "My cousin Sir Arnold is wont to say that women are too soft to rule. I have him in one of my sky cells if you'd like to ask him. Your Prince Daemon used his first wife most cruelly, it is true. But notwithstanding your mother's poor taste in consorts, she remains our rightful queen, and my own blood besides, and Arryn on her mother's side. In this world of men, we women must band together. The Vale and its knights shall stand with her if her grace grants me one request." When the prince asked what that might be, she answered, "Dragons. I have no fear of armies. Many and more have broken themselves against my bloody gate, and the Eyrie is known to be impregnable. But you have descended on us from the sky, as Queen Visenya once did during the conquest, and I was powerless to halt you. I mislike feeling powerless. Send me dragon riders." Now in the book, this set up Rhaenyra riding out here, and this is why she was sent here in the work. As for Lady Jane, the passage says, "Mushroom tells us that this famous maiden was in truth a highborn harlot with a voracious appetite for men, and gives us a salacious tale of how she offered Prince Jacaerys the allegiance of the Vale only if he could bring her to climax with his tongue." Sept and Eustace repeats the widespread rumour that Lady Jane Arryn preferred the intimate companionship of other women, then goes on to say it was not true. In this instance, we must be grateful for Grand Maester Munken's true telling, for he alone confines himself to the high hall of the Eyrie rather than its bedchambers. Now they also say,
"You promised the Queen Rhaenyra 15,000 swords.
In return for protection, a dragon."
Now, this sort of plays on this bit in the book, in which they talked about her heading out there and also the dragon eggs. Even more grave were the tidings from the Vale, where Lady Jane Arryn had assembled 1,500 knights and 8,000 men-at-arms, and sent envoys to the Braavosi to arrange for ships to bring them down upon King's Landing. With them would come a dragon. Lady Rhaenyra of House Targaryen, brave Baela's twin sister, had brought a dragon egg with her to the Vale, an egg that had proved fertile, bringing forth a pale pink hatchling with black horns and a crest. Rhaena named her Morning. Now, we learn these eggs haven't hatched, and know that some won't in the series. Now, there is some back and forth at the moment, as the director said that these were Dany's eggs. I was over the moon, mate, because I called it, but then the showrunners walked back the comments. I feel like they don't really have a plan either way, and we're just doing this perhaps as a visual reference. The director clearly intended it, but the showrunners are obviously who's in charge. So yeah, let me know below what you think, but I still stand with the idea that we'll see the creation of Dany's eggs at some point. Now the pair kind of bicker back and forth because they haven't hatched, and yeah, it's sort of like when you order dragons from Wish. I also feel like this is where Rhaena learns of her grandmother's death, and it's sort of played like she's blindsided her to give her a bit of a gut punch. Back on Dragonstone, we then see Mysaria and Rhaenyra discussing war and how restricted she is by being a woman. Taught academically, Rhaenyra has always been against this. It all ties back to her ripping a page out the Maester's book in Season 1, and she's always done things differently. This too is mirrored in Mysaria, who's gone from a slave to the master of Whisperers. The scar around her neck highlights the collar she used to wear, and she's been through a lot. She knows that there's more than one way to fight a war, and we also see one of her servants get dismissed. This is Alinda Massey, who's a character that's appeared throughout the series. She was the one who told Rhaenyra Alicent had requested her appearance right after she'd just given birth. She also helped in the birth of Visenya and has been a handmaid of the Queen for a very long time. In the books, House Massey is extremely loyal to both the Targaryens and Velaryons, as their home of the Massey Hook is in the middle of both Dragonstone and Driftmark. We'll talk about how this character plays in his stuff later on, but they get sent out directly to King's Landing. Now we also have the pair looking at the skull of Meraxes, which juxtaposes the head of the dragon earlier. There it was paraded through the streets, whereas here it's respected as a monument. Meraxes was shot through the eye by a scorpion, which caused her to plummet to the ground. This also killed her rider Rhaenys, so it's symbolic of our Rhaenys' death as well. Anyway, with Baela, we see her going out to Rhaenyra, with the latter holding a box, which is later revealed to hold the hand of the Queen Pin. This gets passed around from her to Baela to Corlys, and this happens during scenes in which they all remember Rhaenys. Now here we hear the tale of how Rhaenys claimed Meraxes. This happened in 87 AC, with it belonging to Alyssa Targaryen. During this time, she was called the Queen-to-be, but as we know, this was taken away from her. Rhaenyra passes the box over and says she doesn't wish to stand alone, and it's clear she's worried about those around her being loyal. So probably not a good time for Daemon to be dreaming of sleeping with his mother. This is Alyssa Targaryen, and yeah, she tells him he was made to wear the crown over his brother, which is obviously playing on his inner desires. Now, we don't know too much of the ins and outs of their relationship, as the work doesn't go too far into detail. However, we do know that within 2 weeks of Daemon being born, that Alyssa took Daemon flying out on Meleys. Sadly, the next child she had proved to be a long and difficult labour, with her giving birth to a boy named Aegon. She died not long after this, and Aegon died shortly after that. This is why we hear how Daemon didn't know her, and it's sort of him wanting everything he never had. However, that blood is still on his hands, which is something that we saw last week. As he woke up, he had blood on one side, but when he flipped this round, it completely disappeared. Last time we talked about how this could be a biblical reference, or even a direct nod to Macbeth. Either way, it's once more him wandering in and out of fantasies, and he looks suspiciously at his cup. Alice Rivers is pouring drinks in the background, and it's a drink that last week put him into a fantasy. Either way, they want to create a great host for the Brackens, but we see as they just show up in the middle of the night later on. The plan pushes them further away, but I do think we'll see more next week of that chapter from before. Now, Simon brings up how difficult it's going to be paying all the workers and men-at-arms that they want, as he says that Larys moved the gold to King's Landing. This is something that was touched upon after Daemon took Harrenhal, with Larys saying it's why the location didn't matter. Simon asks if he can ask the Queen for some money, and he calls him an emissary. Daemon's obviously, not able to do it himself, and he tackles them over the title King Consort, which further plays into his ambition. Now, we actually saw something similar recently with Camilla, who was initially supposed to be labelled Queen Consort. However, they changed this upon Charles's coronation, so now she uses the simpler title as Queen. If Charles dies, it's said she'll become the Dowager Queen, which is also a term that they use in the show with Alicent. Now, speaking of Alicent, we cut to her at the council, and she gets a lot of focus in this scene. Breathing heavily as she learns of what happened to Aegon, this is also the reaction she gives when learning she's being passed over for Aemond. In real time, she witnesses something that Rhaenys and Rhaenyra have known about this world for a long time.
Men would sooner put the realm to the torch than see a woman ascend the Iron Throne.
I was staring at her fingernails here to see if she'd picked away at them further, but obviously her struggles are shown to us here and trying to seem dignified. Alicent has really made her bed, and we see as everyone goes for Aemond over her. Larys, mate, she sent you feet pics. Kristen, bloody hell, and she's seen what the men at the council truly think of her. She's by far the most experienced when it comes to ruling the realm, and Aemond's a hothead who gave his brother a hot head. Ugh. It's because of him that the war escalated so quickly, but it's all about the optics of letting a woman rule. Sadly, this is what Alicent weaponized in the first place, so that this council would support Aegon over Rhaenyra. Obviously, they haven't changed, and this entire strategy to gain power for herself has now shoved her out of it. Now, as we focus on her, we can hear them discussing the standings in the Riverlands. Grover Tully is once more touched upon, with us meeting his grandson last week. Him and his fate helped to change the dynamics of the war, and I'm sure it's something we'll see play out later in the series. It's difficult to focus on it though, as we're drawn into Alicent, and yeah, Olivia Cook does so much by doing so little. Now, Aemond's first official order is to cut down the rat catchers in a... You're gonna make me cry seeing that little dog again. It's just sad seeing him go after the cart, loyally following his master. It's kind of like that story of the dog who entered the train station every day waiting for his dead master to return and disembark the train. Really sad, and I feel like it's put here to juxtapose the disloyalty of Kristen. Confronted by Alicent, she questions whether he's only loyal at night and talks about how they know what Aemond's become. Honestly though, I feel like Kristen's kind of doing what he can to protect her. He's clearly horrified by what he saw at Rooks Rest, and to me he cast her to the side to spare her from the horrors about to be unleashed. She shuts him down though with one of the coldest things I've ever heard.
I did not give you leave to speak my name.
Bloody hell, mate. Bloody formal dumping that. Now, in to go with these scenes, we get some hammer time, and I love how these scenes have allowed us to see the perspective of the small folk. His wife went to the parading of Jaehaerys, and she did this while her own child was sick in bed. It shows how those in the kingdom are willing to put the Targaryens on a pedestal, even though they ruin their lives and they've got the same problems at home. We will talk about Hugh in the spoiler section, but I like how they're beginning to question what's happened. We also hear how neighbours are stealing from other neighbours, which thematically ties into the idea of a civil war. She's seen the light though, and wants to leave King's Landing before the war gets too heated. Unfortunately, everyone's had the same idea, and it's led to civil unrest in the city. They cry out for meat, with this also being what Hugh said the dragon's head was earlier. Anyway, at this point we cross over to the Twins, which is another location you might recognise from the main series. This is where Robb tried to cross, and the events of the Red Wedding went down at. Now, the Twins are one of the most important locations in Westeros, with it being the only crossing point at the Green Fork. Armies and riders would have to travel hundreds of miles in either direction in order to find another place to pass through. Now, it's lying on the route from Winterfell to Riverrun, and it sees all manners of merchants and traders. The Freys originally simply set up the location by building a wooden bridge between the 2 points. Here they ran tolls and charged people to pass, which netted them a fortune over the years. At this point in time, the Twins have been here for roughly 500 years, with them being a monument to the wealth the Freys have amassed. Charging so much has meant they can upgrade it to this giant stone bridge that's also got these impenetrable archways. Now, they once more mention Grover Tully, with him still not casting his allegiance. They also talk about how they fear Vhagar, and we know from the work that he terrorized the Riverlands, including the phrase, "Prince Aemond had become the terror of the Trident, descending from the sky to rain fire and death upon the Riverlands, then vanishing, only to strike again the next day 50 leagues away. Vhagar's flames reduced Old Willow and White Willow to ash, and Hog Hall to blackened stone." And that's pretty much what they're worried about, and Jace offers his protection along with his uncles. While pouting, Magnum, Dragnum, Harrenhal is negotiated to, with Jace requiring a bending of the knee to seal it. These negotiations are kind of all over the place, with the houses constantly promising stuff. It was Luke who refused to promise a betrothal, and we saw what happened to him. However, broken deals would of course prove a lot of characters' downfalls, again with the Freys and Starks being a big one from the main series. Cutting to Harrenhal, we see they're rebuilding the rooms which were caused by Aegon the Conqueror. Haunted by screams, Daemon ends up speaking with Alice Rivers, who sees a cut on his hand. This further creates the blood effect, whilst Alice tells him of the crimes against humanity that the Targaryens are carrying out. Alice is really trying to hammer home the evil he's committing, and this blood on his hands is gonna keep haunting him. Daemon also brings up Aemond and what will happen if Alice comes across him. We will talk about this later on, but they're laying the seeds for something down the line. Daemon also brings up the reality that people won't support Rhaenyra and that he'll need to step up. We've seen it firsthand with Alicent, and I love how there's these fractures within both sides. Aegon fired Otto, his mother's been ousted, and Aemond was willing to slay his brother. War is an ugly thing, and Daemon isn't even that loyal to his wife. Alice taunts him by saying it's a pity he never knew his mother, and judging by that dream, mate, probably best you didn't. Sir Simon then comes in and talks about how the Brackens have been overwhelmed and they've pledged themselves to Daemon. Over with Corlys, we then see as they discuss Rhaenys. Now in the work, we hear about how badly Corlys takes his wife's death, and he lashed out at Rhaenyra. East of Blackwater Bay, Queen Rhaenyra was also faring badly. The death of her son Lucerys had been a crushing blow to a woman already broken by pregnancy, labour and stillbirth. When word reached Dragonstone that Princess Rhaenys had fallen, angry words were exchanged between the Queen and Lord Velaryon, who blamed her for his wife's death. "It should have been you!" the sea snake shouted at her grace. "Staunton sent to you, yet you left it to my wife to answer and forbade your sons to join her." For all the castle knew that the princes Jace and Joff had been eager to fly with Princess Rhaenys to Rooks Rest with their own dragons. Here though, we see a side to him where he's at a loss without her. He wants to sail into the west and be lost, which Baelor berates him for. This is where he went to in the wake of Laenor's death, and I wonder if it's going to come back around with him returning in the show. In the book, the character died, but we know from the series that he is still out there. Now Baelor wants to honor Rhaenys and her sacrifice by making sure that her goals are carried out. Rhaenys never got to see a woman ascend to the throne, and she was of course passed over. Baelor wants to make sure her death wasn't for nothing, and Corlys offers to make her the heir in the end. She turns this down, but it shows how much the character's grown. In the past, he only cared about names, which is why he put those strong boys as his heirs. He was well aware they weren't his, but as he said, history remembers names. In this world, women don't carry on the names, and thus in getting married, they end up losing it. So him putting this power on her shows how much he's changed, and how he actually cares about blood more than names. Now with Rhaenyra, we see she sends Sir Alfred to Harrenhal. He does this because she knows he's loyal, and though he disrupts the council, she genuinely seems to trust him. Guy's kind of like the middleman in all this, basically going between a married couple arguing, and yeah, I love the curveball they've added in with Daemon. He was never so much out for his own ends this much in the work, and we're starting to see why his nickname's the Rogue Prince. Over with him, he's awoken by Sir Simon, who's got the River Lords banging at his door. I think what this highlights is that when you give your soldiers certain powers in war, that there are those that will use it to terrorize others. These have been victims of that, with the Blackwoods overreaching in their surrender. I love how the Bracken and Blackwood fights have been laced throughout the backbone of the season, with it working as a metaphor for the Blacks and Greens. Both believe they're victims that are in the right, while they see the others as visiting atrocities on them. Now, we did a big breakdown on the history of their beef in episode 3, with it going back thousands of years. Neither really know who started it though, which is something Rhaenys talked about as well. They also see him as someone who ordered the murder of a baby in the arms of his mother. Obviously, the story's been slightly twisted, but it shows how these things alter perceptions. In the end, they refuse to raise their banners for him, and Daemon must tackle with the fact that the war's getting out of his control. He was the one who opened the door for this though, and I love how we get this great match cut here. As he leans against the fire, we then cut to Rhaenyra doing the same thing, but it's shot from the opposite side. This highlights the fractures, and she sits down and gets her hair done, akin to what happened when she nearly faced death at the hands of Arik. Now, if you want to show your allegiance, then definitely check out our merch store right below the video. We've got t-shirts from the Greens, Blacks, and our Dragons Drama and Destiny one that's a perfect fit for the Summer of Dragons. We also have our Sith Happens Star Wars shirt and our brand new Alien Chestburster one, along with the classic ones like Theory Time. And also pick up this one if you like it. I don't know how many people of you want to walk around wearing a t-shirt that says heavy, but a huge thank you to everyone who's bought one. Now let's get into the rest of the breakdown. Now from here we cut to King's Landing to see Rhaenyra's servant Alinda going in. Wishing to see an old friend, we see her heading back to the Cock Inn, where the door's opened by the servant girl that Aegon assaulted in season 1. This was brushed under the rug by Alicent, and we then saw her working here when Ulf White entered. Now I do wonder exactly what's going on here, and have a little theory time, let's call it a theory time. Now we know that this is a hangout of Aemond, and that the woman he's likely in love with lives here. We see how he scorned her during their last encounter, and it's possible that this could come back around. I feel like they might try and poison him, or potentially even spy on his battle plans. This would give the Blacks a competitive edge, but this is just me kind of piecing it together. In between these moments we get shots of Aemond, so I do feel like it's connected to him. Let me know below what you think, as it is possible they could also be doing something with Aegon's bastard. He's still hanging in the air from season 1, and we saw a blonde girl dancing at the Cock Inn. Potentially they could be pulling these all out to delegitimize the king and the Targaryens, but I think that's probably unlikely. Also, yeah, I know that girl isn't Aegon's, yeah, she's probably the same age or older, it's just one of the Targaryen. But anyway, moving on. Helena asks Aemond if it was worth the price to receive the throne, and we know how much damage he's caused. This is highlighted in the next scene when we cut over to Aegon. Laying there like Viserys, Alicent hovers there like she did in Viserys' death. It's such an impactful moment, and all of this could have been averted. I also think that it's purposely put here to reflect a scene earlier in the season. Alicent went to Aegon's and caught him crying in the night, but there she refused to comfort him. However, now she's desperately trying to provide any love possible for her son, and yeah, what a devastating turn for her as a mother. And I feel sorry that he just kind of got forced down this path. Parents and their children is something that's laced throughout the show, and the idea of lineage is very important. This is something cemented in the next scene when we cut to Jace going to Rhaenyra. Poring over the books once more, we see her talking about her idol Visenya. Rhaenyra wears a braid just like her and also named her daughter after her. Bringing up how she was the original rider of Vhagar, we also have her wielding Dark Sister. These have been handed down the line in the family and now find themselves on opposite sides. There was even talk online that Maelys looked at Rhaenys sadly last week because it was wondering why its old mate was attacking it. Reminds me when I found out people weren't hitting the thumbs up, and it was a right kick in the teeth. Rhaenyra is proud though that Jace went out and did his own thing, but she's also a bit angry that everyone keeps disobeying her. It also doesn't sit well with her that she's forced to remain on Dragonstone and that people are dying in her name. She knows that eventually they'll run out of dragons and that she'll have to throw herself into combat. This is why the dragon seeds are so important, and we end the episode with hope of them looking at the records. Now that ends the episode, and it also takes us into the spoilers section. Huge thank you to you if you watched up to this point as well, and for the next part of the video, I'm going to talk about what I think will happen next week. Now the first of these is how much Aemond rises to the situation, with the work saying, supremely confident in his own prowess as a warrior and the might of his dragon Vhagar, Aemond was eager to take the battle to the foe. The whore on Dragonstone is not a threat, he said. Now this is something Kristen called her in the past, showing the completely toxic influence. No more than Rowan and these traitors in the Reach. The danger is my uncle. Once Daemon is dead, all these fools flying our sister's banner will run back to their castles and trouble us no more. Now as for Otto, we haven't heard from him for quite a while. However, as they said, he was banished to Old Town, with this then playing into the plot quite a bit. The tidings from the south were ominous as well. Obedient to his uncle's entreaties, Lord Aemond Hightower had issued forth from Old Town with 1,000 knights, 1,000 archers, 3,000 men-at-arms, and uncounted thousands of camp followers, sellswords, free riders, and rabble, only to find himself set upon by Sir Alan Beesbury and Lord Alan Tarley. Though commanding far fewer men, the two Allans harassed him day and night, raiding his camps, murdering his scouts, setting fire in his lines of march. Farther south, Lord Custer Iron had issued forth from the Three Towers to fall upon Hightower's baggage train. Worse reports had reached his lordship that a host equal in size to his own was descending on the Manta, led by Thaddeus Rowan, Lord of Golden Grove. Lord Aemond had therefore decided he could not proceed without support from King's Landing. "We have need of your dragons," he wrote. Now on top of this, we also have Hugh Hammer and his familial relationships. Though they saw the Targaryens as gods, they'll see they're just normal people pretty soon. That's because Hugh is actually a Targaryen bastard and someone known as a dragon seed. These are recruited by the Blacks, and it allows them to increase the amount of dragon riders. Along with Hugh, we also have Ulf White, who we met earlier in the season. These are both dragon seeds that are drafted into the war, and I love how they've already shown that they have issues with the king. I can imagine things are going to get worse with Aemon in charge, and for the final point, I want to talk about Daemon's comments.
The realm will suffer if Aemon One Eye rules. You should pray you never meet him.
Now here he's talking about how Alice needs to be careful of Aemon, but the pair actually hit it off. Alice ends up becoming Aemon's paramour, and she might even be aware of what's going to happen in the future. Using foresight, she may see herself with Aemon and be purposely sending Daemon crazy for this reason. That's a bit of a reach, I'll admit, eh? But the video's almost over, mate. Shabow! Either way, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the episode, so make sure you drop them in the comment section below. We also have where things are going to be going, and we'll be dropping that episode 6 trailer breakdown over the next couple of days. We make these videos before watching those, which is why we don't really include them here. I'll be back before you know it with that though, and huge thank you for watching this long. Please drop a like on the video, and if you want to support the channel as a member of the Spoiler Society, then please click the join button. You'll get early access to videos every week, and it goes such a long way towards helping us out. Now if you want something else to watch, you've got a breakdown of The Boys on screen right now. Season 4 episode 7 released the other day, and yeah, lots of things to talk about before we hit the finale. So check that out, and huge thank you for checking out this video. I've been your host Paul, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time, mate. You take care and have a good night. If you've stayed up late to watch this, apologies, but have a good night's sleep, mate. Take care, bye.